or I mean bycatch in general. How would you define bycatch?
Bycatch is the incidental capture of any non-target marine animal during fishing practice. So the consortium mostly works with endangered and threatened species like whales, sea turtles, sharks, but bycatch can also be non-target fish or juvenile fish that have little commercial value. It can also be sessile organisms like coral. And sometimes bycatch is discarded alive, but often it's brought up dead. And I think bycatch is a complicated issue because while we in the U.S. might think that all bycatch is discarded, it's not what you were trying to fish for, so you just throw it back. In many countries, fishermen keep the bycatch to sell, or they eat it themselves. One reason that we focus on endangered and threatened species is because bycatch is a really serious issue that can significantly impact their populations. In one case, the freshwater porpoise, the freshwater Chinese porpoise, bycatch was a major cause for the extinction of that animal. In the Gulf of California, the population of the vaquita, which is another small marine mammal, is endangered because of gillnet entanglements mainly.
Okay.
So it is a pretty serious issue for a lot of threatened species.
Okay, and you mentioned a couple of things that I want to sort of dive into a little more. One is you mentioned that when the fish are brought up or animals are brought up, they say usually bycatch is discarded. So people will, in other words, like say it's a trawl net. Let's just say we're a big net, that trawls the bottom, scrapes the bottom for bottom feeding fish. Sometimes catches pelagic fish depending on where they are. They bring it up to the surface. The fishermen bring it up to the surface. They bring it on their boat. Now they're looking for a specific species or one or two species. The other species, what they do, they just, if it's alive, they grab it and they just throw it over? Is that sort of what I'm looking at?
It definitely depends on the fishery and what types of fish they're catching. In some cases, they can throw back a lot of fish alive. In some cases, a lot of the fish are going to already be dead when they're pulled up.
Why are a lot of the fish dead when they pull up?
Either because they've been in a heavy net and their physical trauma, physical trauma from being pulled up out of the water, physiological stress has a lot of impact on certain species of fish, but it all varies.
I guess like bringing out from depth too, right? Like their swim bladder could burst or things like that. Okay,
that's definitely one thing that can happen. And then how much time they're spent on deck in the air. And how they're handled and stuff can all affect their survival rate. So discard mortality and survival is a really interesting topic.
Right. So yeah. So how when I'm always thinking of trawl nets. I know there's a lot of different ways of fishing, but I'm picturing trawl nets right now. When they bring it on board, I remember when I was in school and I've done some work with trawling, you had to work especially fast. Now this is more to, we were on a science expedition trying to count and enumerate species. But for fishermen, do they work just as fast to, one, grab the species they want, and two, discard them as fast as possible, to especially the live ones, to keep them alive?
I'm not completely sure how that process works, and I think it really depends on which fishery you're fishing in. And I know more about longline fisheries bring up a lot of live animals, and they are able to de-hook them while they're still in the water or bring them on board and take hooks out, and so they can discard a lot of animals alive. Yeah, it really depends, and it's commercial versus artisanal fisheries. Everything happens differently. So it depends on who's fishing, and their behavior probably varies greatly.
Okay. No, that's fine. Can you said you know a lot about longline. Can you describe what a longline is and how it works?
Sure. So longlines are basically fishing lines with a main line and then many other lines falling off the main line that have baited hooks on the bottom of them. And long lines can be thousands of hooks. They can stretch over miles of ocean, or they can just be short sets. And they can target various levels of ocean depth.
Okay. And then so what happens with those baits? They go for targeted fish. On long lines, what are the main targets? Like say on average, what are people looking for a long line?
Tuna is one of the main species caught by long lines. I think that's probably the biggest one.
Okay, and what? So they bait it with other fish or squid or things like that.
Both fish and squid, live or dead, are two types of bait.
Okay, and that essentially could attract tuna, but it can attract other things like sharks, turtles as well.
Yes, so both. Actually, many different species can be attracted to long lines because of the bait or because of the target fish. So a lot of long lines are depredated by other marine mammals. So when a tuna is caught, a pilot whale will come over and try to eat the tuna off the hook.
Okay.
And that can lead to bycatch because then the pilot whale can itself become hooked by the long line. And then it also leads, long lines can entangle turtles, especially leatherback turtles that might be swimming around, checking out the bait, trying to eat the bait, and then they get hooked either externally by the long line or wrapped up in the line itself. So
okay. And so now when this long line set out, the fishermen set it out, and then they come back at a different time, a later time, however that time may be. So that's what gives it time for, once the tuna, say a tuna bites on a bait, gets caught, the fishermen aren't there to take it up right away.
Right.
A lot of times it could be left for hours, it could be left for a couple of days. Am I correct?
Yeah, the soak times vary significantly between fisheries. But the one thing with long lines is when they do catch, bycatch species, there's still room for the animal to keep moving around.
Right.
So that's why they bring up many species still alive.
Okay. Now, so why is bycatch such a problem? I mean, is this, are these isolated incidents, or is this happening every time a line is put out or a trawl net is set? Or gill nets are set? Like, is it really a global problem, like I said in my intro, or is this sort of just case things that have just been blown out of proportion by quote unquote environmentalists?
It's definitely a global problem in every fishery, but not at all times. You can have thousands of sets that never pick up an endangered species. And then you can have some fisheries that, just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time and have, huge numbers of sea turtle bycatch or cetacean bycatch. So the main commercial and artisanal fisheries around the world are long lines, trawls, gill nets, purse seines, and traps. And they're, endless varieties of those different types of fishing techniques. But there's definitely significant bycatch in all of those different fisheries.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me because, I know the consortium focuses a lot on endangered species, and obviously, there's good reason to. But I remember I did a project, my master's project was on the Scotian Shelf, and looking at demersal fishing over a 30-year period, when the government of Canada did their annual trawls, they would look at how the structure changes, and especially when the cod fishery was really big back 15 to 30 years ago, they noticed that the structure changed, the fish community structure changed as cod and other like halibut and haddock. The big demersal fishes were dominating the structure at the bottom. That domination started to decrease as we started to fish them out, and other pelagic species, smaller species, would sort of rise to that occasion, and the structure would change over time. Especially when we realized that the cod fishery, we had to shut down the cod fishery. A little too late, but we had to shut it down anyway. And I believe the same thing happened in the States. That switch, is that something that bycatch can do? Like, it's not just endangered species, it's really all the fish and invertebrates like lobster and things like that get caught up. And again, I'm going back to trawl because I'm more familiar with that, but I mean that would happen elsewhere with pelagic fisheries and long lining and gill nets and things. Is that a major problem, like looking at that community structure and sort of I guess I'm more thinking of changing biodiversity as well in a system?
Well, I think that you can think of bycatch as in certain circumstances, it is taking those animals out of the population, just as regular fishing, target fishing would do.
Right.
When there is high discard mortality, it acts the same as regular fishing practices do. And if it's substantial bycatch in the same area for a long period of time, and those effects could be similar.
Okay. And I guess, has there ever been a case that you're aware of that where, say, a fish or any kind of species was, so the population was stable, but due to bycatch, it actually fell more into an endangered or threatened status?
So,
and can you name one or two if you know of any?
Well, the vaquita in the Gulf of California is definitely one of the species that is endangered very heavily because of gill netting. These things, the bycatch is never the only issue that's going on. The North Atlantic right whale is a species that we work with a lot in the Northeast. The population is down to about 450 individuals, and it was, the population decreased substantially because of hunting in the previous century, but it's remained very low. And bycatch in the ropes from lobster traps and ship strikes are their two main threats that are keeping the population from making a full recovery. And it's just the take of one or two every year, but it's significant enough because the population is so small to prevent a full recovery of the species.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. So you described some of we've talked about some of the fishing gears and methods used to fish fish and invertebrates and things like that. Which have the highest bycatch rates?
Or
do you guys measure it that way?
It's difficult to say because they have bycatch, and the bycatches of different species in each in each type of fishing gear. So I don't think that you could say that one has a lot more than any other.
Well, let's just say, for a trawl, I guess for a trawl net, it's quite a large net. You're catching quite a number of species you're looking at tons of fish, like in terms of weight of fish. I would imagine that would have quite a high rate of bycatch, just because you're not just selecting for certain fish. You're actually, I know there's selection methods for each net, how they have the different hole sizes, but I would imagine that would catch a lot more bycatch than say a long line, which could be more selective, and plus there's probably less hooks on a line.
Yeah, it's a complicated topic because, as you said, each type of gear can really target a specific species,
right.
But there are those instances where, a trawl will pull up a lot of fish that will be discarded. But in the longline fisheries, there's often more, it's often more bycatch that makes up the total catch than target catch.
Okay.
So sometimes 50% of the catch in long lines will be blue sharks.
Really?
And they'll only have maybe 20% of target catch.
Wow.
So it varies a lot through the different types of gear. And when we talk about global bycatch, we have so little information on the types of fisheries around the world, and especially in small-scale artisanal fisheries, we don't know the numbers.
Right.
There's no observer program for those kinds of things. And so we're kind of just guessing at how much. We're making estimates about how much bycatch happens in each fishery.
Okay.
So there's a lot of work that needs to be done to try and quantify those things.